speaking of Chris Hansen, he is our guest tonight. For those of you who don't know, Chris Hansen, I know everyone here wants to talk about his former show, To Catch a Predator, but he's done many things. It seems like you've got you've done. I remember you covered Columbine, and I think you covered 9/11 and
Yes.
several huge stories over on NBC.
Sure.
But I have so much love in my heart for To Catch a Predator. We were talking briefly before the recording started. Big fan. So thank you for coming on tonight.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So you've got your Kickstarter campaign running right now for your new show, Hansen versus Predator. That's correct?
Absolutely. And I've got good news today as we speak. We blew by our goal, and we're well on our way to surpassing it in a great way.
Excellent. So I've got a few questions I want to ask. So for those who don't know, you're To Catch a Predator. Basically, you set up these pedophiles. They're decoys put online posing as underage boys or girls, and you sort of lure these pedophiles through online chats to a decoy house. And when they get there, sometimes there's a decoy waiting on that looks underage to lure them further into the house. And when they get there, they get to talk to you.
Exactly. Well, what happens is the decoys go online. And when we started this, we merely used chat rooms from Yahoo and AOL. I mean, that's basically what was out there at the time in 2004 when we started. And they'd go into the chat room with a profile that included a picture that was, clearly underage, and just sit and wait. And suddenly guys would start approaching. And they would bring up the topic of sex. And then they would talk about coming over to the house and meeting. And all of a sudden they're knocking on our door. And we have this confrontation with these guys. And it was really, really compelling.
So it was never really you having to bait people in. It was just
we had a very
you making a picture and them responding on their own accord. That was just all it was.
We had a very strict protocol, and we will in the new investigation as well, because otherwise you get into, potential entrapment and other issues that you don't want to do. You don't want to entice somebody to do something they wouldn't normally do. That's not fair. But if there's somebody out there who's going to do it, and you can catch them doing it, and you can teach children how to be safe by getting in this guy's mind, by doing an interview with him, and teach parents how to protect their children, well, then, that's our job at the end of the day.
So when you were first approached for this, I'm wondering what the genesis of this was. Was it that you were already passionate about these online sex predators? Or like when you first heard the idea for To Catch a Predator, did you think it was going to take off, or were you part of the initial process?
I came up with the idea. I
great.
talked to a friend of mine who's a reporter in Detroit, where I came from, a fellow named Kevin Dietz, who took my job when I left to go to NBC, and he was telling me about the online watchdog group Perverted Justice. And I started to think, boy, if we could use their ability to go online as decoys and combine it with our ability to wire a house with hidden cameras and microphones, it could be quite compelling. So I pitched the story, and they decided they wanted to do it, and a lot of smart people weighed in on it, producers, senior producers, etc. And so we set up in Bethpage, Long Island to do the first one, and we're there, and I'm driving to the location, and I'm stuck in traffic going over the Throgs Neck Bridge, and I start to think, gosh, what if nobody shows up? What if I've just wasted tens of thousands of dollars of the network's money? And with that, my producer, Lynn Keller, calls and says, where are you? Two guys are scheduled to show up in 45 minutes. So traffic clears, I get there, and all of a sudden, it was amazing. It was just boom, boom, boom. But
you're in traffic next to the pedophiles. You're both staring at your watches like, I got to get there.
Who's going to be there first, But I thought we'd do one or two, and we'd make our point, and that'd be it. And nobody ever show up again. I mean, I figured at some point, I would end up like the Maytag repairman. I'd be, taking a nap on the counter with nobody showing up, because we would have proved our point. But sadly, guys kept coming. It got to the point where a guy walks in and he puts, his marijuana out on the counter, and he's talking to the decoy, and it comes time for me to come out. And before I can say a word, he says, "Oh, you're Chris Hansen." I said, "Well, how did you know that?" He said, "Well, I watch the shows all the time, and when I miss them, I download them from the internet." I said, "Do you get the trouble that you just walked into?" I mean, it was a telling moment,
You should have stopped it. So you're telling me that not only are you a pedophile, you practice online piracy as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Bottom of the barrel, sir.
I got a question.
Is there anything... Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this recently. On YouTube, there was a big controversy about, a pedophile, but... My sense of morality isn't set by the law. It's set by, what I think is right and wrong. And it turned out he was an 18-year-old dating a 15-year-old, which is legal in most states. But in Kentucky, I guess it's not. It was some sort of misdemeanor or something, but it was sexual assault, and it was just online conversation, and but there was no sex. How do you justify, or like, how does that play out in your own head when you have different laws in different states regarding what's right and wrong?
Well, we would not do an 18 and 15-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
It's too close a call. Excuse me. There's a lot of pollen on the East Coast these days.
I hear that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It just bothers my allergies. You know, an 18 and 15-year-old, although illegal,
in some states,
in some states, was too close a call for us. It was always, 21, 22 or older, and 14 or younger. Because otherwise, it's a gray area. Could be wrong, could be illegal, but a gray area nevertheless.
In this case, I think I get psychologists and psychiatrists mixed up. I don't know who saw him, but he was forced to see one by the court. And they determined that these people were developmental peers and that this wasn't like a pedophile incentivized relationship, for lack of a better term. And it was just like, man, I feel like these laws should be federalized and there should be a national standard instead of a state by state one.
Well, that's the problem, sometimes you get into these situations where, for instance, you see in high schools, and there was a recent case in Virginia within the last year where all these kids were sexting each other, and they're all 16 years old. Mm-hmm. And then the prosecutor gets into this, and they could, charge all these kids with distributing child pornography, which is a felony. But it's peer sharing.
Right.
And so what do you do? And ultimately what the prosecutor did was call all the kids in and all the parents and say, hey, look, y'all got to wake up and realize what you're doing here is going to be out there forever. You don't need this, and it's harmful to a lot of people on a lot of different levels, and it allows blackmail, and it allows bullying and all kinds of things, and you got to cut it out because we don't want to charge everybody with child porn. It's not what the law was meant to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sexting is a funny thing. Like the thing I've got in my head, in the same way that abstinence education is a tough thing, like it's hard to pitch a total zero. It's like, dude, you can send each other enticing pictures where you're wearing something, right? Bikinis are hot enough. Shirts or belly shirts or whatever are hot enough. If you want to do something semi-naughty, you can still be dressed where you don't have to regret this and allow blackmail and all that other crazy stuff.
Well, I know people always think, kids especially, and I say kids, I mean teenagers and college kids, and look, my guys are 23 and 21, and I have this discussion with them all the time. It's like, be careful what you're looking at and what you're doing, because, just because you think it goes away on Snapchat or Instagram in a matter of minutes, that's no guarantee. And especially because these guys are going into my business. I said, you don't want to deal with that,
Yeah, I have no idea how the accidental child porn download works either. Like, if anyone's ever been to 4chan.
Oh, of course you don't.
Well, I meant in terms of like legality. Like, I bet it's all expired now, but I've seen it. Have you guys ever seen a naked kid online? Like, it happens. People post that stuff, and you don't even have to go seek it out.
I've never seen it, and I don't want to see it. And my position on that is, and I understand what you're saying, that it can happen accidentally. But anytime an image of child pornography is viewed, it's another victimization of a child. To me, it's tantamount to raping a child, because somebody was abused to take that photo, and it's human trafficking, and it's one of its worst forms.
I agree. I was gonna ask as well. This time around, will the police be waiting for our gentleman outside? Because that's the coup de grace.
Oh, that's so satisfying.
That's the cherry on top.
Well, yes, we will have police will be doing a parallel investigation, as in most of the investigations we did in To Catch a Predator. The first two we did not have police doing a parallel investigation, and two things happened. One, it was a little unsatisfying for the viewers to see this guy just walk off into the sunset. And even though police did and prosecutors did make cases against some of these guys, including the rabbi and the naked guy and some of the others, it made more sense to kind of involve the police and let them do their own investigation and get their own version of the transcripts from our online decoys and take it from there.
What was the most shocking, the most bizarre thing that either you read in the transcripts or perhaps the suspect did once they got to the decoy house? Because I've seen and heard so many things, and I sometimes I feel like I can read it on your face when you're conducting that. You're just, what were you thinking? You almost. Are you ever embarrassed reading the transcript?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
And you have to remember that I'm not just responsible to my audience or to my bosses, which I am, but I'm also responsible to, my kids' friends' parents, teachers at the schools, and all that stuff. I mean, there have been examples where, I've had a kid sitting in a class in college where suddenly they're showing, To Catch a Predator shows, and he's, do I say that's my dad? Do I give that up? Do I want that kind of scrutiny? What do I do here? And it's a big debate. And we tried to be just graphic enough to show what these guys are capable of doing without being offensive. And I hope that we, tiptoed along that fine line. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what the most graphic moment was or disturbing moment, I mean, it's a 25-way tie for first. I mean, we had two naked guys, one who wanted to conduct a sex act with a young girl and a cat and whipped cream and all kinds of stuff.
That
Another
guy
guy walked in and showed up again the second day, and a guy who showed up in Fort Myers, Florida, with his 5-year-old son to walk in the house, and that silenced everybody. I mean,
he brought his kid.
He brought his kid, yeah. And you got to imagine. See, I work with a group of guys on this who've been with me in the darkest corners of the world, whether it's, in Africa doing, thievery stories when it comes to identity theft and all kinds of things, or Al-Qaeda using blood diamonds to launder, terrorist funds. I mean, these guys have been around the world with me. And this one scene, this guy pulls up. He's the last guy in an investigation, as I said, in Fort Myers, Florida. He pulls up in his SUV. He goes to the back door, and I'm thinking he's going to pull out a pizza and a six-pack. Instead, he leads his 5-year-old son out by the hand, walks up the driveway, into the house. Now, I've got to figure out what I'm going to do. A collective gasp goes out in the house. And so he walks in, and I said to him, on the fly, I said, look, you know why you're here. I know why you're here. I'm Chris Hansen, and I'm just going to let you go because I don't want to traumatize your son with whom you brought. And he left, and the police arrested him and gently scooped up the son, and that was it. But it was just so shocking that somebody would do that on a Sunday afternoon.
I feel I have to ask: was he planning to involve the son in some sort of sex act, or was he just babysitting for the day?
He was babysitting for the day. His wife was at work. I think he was going to go set him in another room and watch Barney videos or whatever, and go do his thing with a 13 or 14-year-old boy. And the shocking part of it was the backstory to that, which was he had to move out of his house because Child Services said you can't be in there during this investigation. Ultimately, he moves into the house. The child is moved to a relative's house. He's living there, and has another child with the mother before he goes to trial and gets a 4-year prison sentence. And it just really. The lesson of that is, and what we're going to do with the new series is we're going to try and do more of the front story and the backstory. In other words, we're going to try to have more information about this person before they actually come to the house. So, we see a scenario where there could be surveillance and, show this person doing, if it's a teacher, we show them teaching. If it's a doctor, we show them, practicing medicine. We do whatever we have to do. And then you have more context.
That's brilliant.
It's coming from and doing. So that's,
how do you gather it though? Like,
we're going to have to do research, and we have a strategic alliance with LexisNexis and Security Solutions and other data mining outfits. And we're going to be able to do it.
That's going to be brilliant. That's going to create a whole narrative. There's going to be drama. You'll be able to
exactly. I mean,
that's
you
going to be
can
excellent.
watch the person, as much as we can, build into the situation. Now, in the past investigations, obviously we've been able to know something about the people. We knew the rabbi was the rabbi. We knew the doctor was a doctor. We knew the police officer was a police officer. But this actually gives us the ability to paint a better picture of who this.
And perhaps to follow them beforehand. Maybe you follow them to that drugstore they go to purchase those condoms, and that would be great as a viewing experience.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, have you ever been so angry or upset with one of these guys that you're sitting across from that that you've actually wanted to hit them? Like these when you hear what these guys are there for, and when you see
there have
the
to
guys,
be some,
because some of them have an attitude. It seems like there's like just here, doing my thing. What's your problem?
Oh, I'm just here to rape a kid. Like you have to want to punish those fucks.
Well, I understand what you're getting at. I mean, my job is not to mete out punishment. My job is to get these people to sit and talk and get in their brains so I can better understand the way they think, so we can better protect our children. Yes, as a parent of two sons, did I sometimes feel a sense of outrage? Of course. It's not my position to get in a fight. I mean, I was more worried about, okay, where are their hands? What do they got going on? Even though we had tons of security, and we will in the next investigations, there's a lot going on. And you're watching a lot of different things. You're trying to go through the transcripts. You're trying to engage the guy. I mean, anybody can jump out of the bushes and scare somebody and make them run off and create, 30 seconds of dramatic television. My goal with this, and with any other investigation I've done, is to get them to sit, talk, and get in their minds. And that's what we were able to do, and that's what made this and unique, and what will make the new investigation.
So on the flip side of that,
was there ever a time where you came across someone as you walked into that kitchen where you thought, oh, Jesus, like this guy doesn't look like a bad guy or doesn't sound like a bad guy? Was there ever a time where you came in and you just wished this guy had thought better of himself?
Well, I mean, obviously there were some cases where, you feel sympathy for these guys, and, they break down into three different categories. And I'm not a psychiatrist or an expert in this field, but based on my experience, you've got the hardcore heavy hitters who'd be doing this with or without the internet. You've got this group in the middle who have a predilection for it, but wouldn't be doing it unless they had the internet and the addictive quality and the 24-hour access and, the anonymity, the 3 A's. And then you've got this other group, guys in the early 20s who are, not very social, and they see a 14-year-old girl online. They figure, well, it's only 8 years difference, and in 10 years it won't make a difference at all, and they go for it. Those are the guys who can probably be given probation and registration as a sex offender and computer monitoring and a rap on the hand and never do it again. The other guys, it's a different story. We had 3-time offenders in some of these cases walk in.
Well, you mentioned earlier the gentleman who came 2 days in a row, I think, it's absurd. Going at that point, what's the farthest distance or the greatest lengths that someone ever went to get to that house?
I think we had somebody drive about 5 hours. I think it was the greatest, 5 to 6 hours. And that happened on a couple of occasions, from one side of one state to the other, or from another state down. I mean, we had a guy who was actually a police officer in a small town at the Alabama-Florida border, who he'd been online all week, and he was just a really graphic chatter. And, some of these guys just chat and they never show up. I mean, probably 40% of them. So we shut down one night early for us because we'd work till 3 o'clock in the morning, the day before. And we get back to the hotel, and suddenly cell phones are going off, and it's the decoy calling saying this guy just called from a payphone. He said he went by the house and it was dark. Now, there's no one switch to turn on the predator house. I mean, this takes a lot of engineers to put this together. So what ended up happening was the police made a traffic stop. And in fact, the guy was a police officer. He had a .38 caliber gun in his pocket. In his car, he had an assault rifle, a shotgun, and a .45. Hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and a video camera, and an anchor, and duct tape, and bulletproof vests. I mean, God knows what would happen had he showed up. And people always ask, did you ever feel there was a time when you dodged a bullet? And I think, that was the time.
I can't imagine what the anchor was for.
He would tie it to a body, perhaps, and throw it into a body of water.
It's hard to speculate. I mean, maybe he had a boat. I mean, he was an outdoorsman. I mean, maybe he, wouldn't have used any of the guns at all. But
that's true as well.
To find out,
As you laid out that laundry list, I was thinking, I've got all that stuff in my
car.
Yeah,
right. I was like, a .38. That's not that big a deal.
The assault rifle was bothersome, though.
Yeah, exactly, Kyle. The assault rifle was bothersome. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's definitely bothersome when you've got a pedophile come into the decoy house with one. You wouldn't want
How do you feel about the sex registration? I've heard people. I feel like all my questions have been pro pedo today, which is not my actual stance. But in most cases, like if I were to knock over a liquor store or something, when it's done and I've paid my time and it's over and it's set. When you're a sexual predator and there's some good reasons for it because of the recidivism rate. I'm going to screw that word up. But you never finish paying your time. Like for the rest of your life, you have to notify all your neighbors. You can't trick or treat, or like it's a forever thing. Is that right?
Well, look, like anything else, I think in a high percentage of the cases where there's been a sexual assault, it's a person who there's a high probability of a repeat offense. And so people deserve to know that that person's living in their neighborhood. And you talk to guys at the U.S. Marshals who do these kind of programs, the registered guys, they don't worry about. It's the guys who don't register they worry about. So you know where they're at. They can be monitored and everything else. The guys I feel sorry for are like as you talked about before, the 17-year-old high school kid who has a 15-year-old girlfriend and gets pinched on that, and suddenly this kid can't go to college and be a football star because he's got this registered sex offender problem going on.
I recently saw where a couple was having sex on a beach, a public beach, and they got caught and arrested, and they're both having to register as sex offenders.
Yeah, I mean, I have to question that. I mean, that's not the purpose of the law. And when you get into that zero tolerance aspect of any law, justice is going to be, murky at best.
Yeah, the dual kids thing is the one that bothers me. Like, make them even younger, right? Make them both 14.
Right.
That's...
I mean, I think
sometimes they're just not old enough to...
Parents, I don't know that's a law enforcement issue.
Right. That, yeah, that's the trickiest one. I got questions totally outside the show. Did you
Sure.
want to? Yeah. So, Chris, you've made your living on front of the camera, right? That makes you, in your field anyway, the 1%, right? 99% of the people who are actors or want to be journalists or such don't actually get your job. What advice do you give people who wish they were you, right? Who aspire to be working actors? Do you tell them get a doctor degree, go be an attorney, or do you say like go for it, go for this extreme long shot?
Well,
it's possible.
Listen, I think if you have passion for it, obviously, I've been fortunate enough to have some lucky breaks in my career. I got interested in it when I was 14, and Jimmy Hoffa was kidnapped a mile and a half down the street from the house where I grew up. And so I'd ride my bike up there and go check out the crime scene, and you'd see the FBI agents and the Bloomfield Township Police and the reporters and the network correspondents. I got bitten by the bug early. So when I went off to Michigan State, on the first day of school, I went and signed up for the volunteer radio station, and it all started. And it fortunately fell into place. And people say, how did you get there? I said, well, I'm too stupid to realize there's anything I cannot do. And I just kept doing it. And Lansing turned into Tampa, and Tampa turned into Detroit, and Detroit turned into NBC, and NBC turned into all the things I'm working on now. So, yeah, really fortunate. But, I tell people, look, if you really want to do it, and I've had kids who've come through as my interns, et cetera, and, they weren't, immediate standouts. But a lot of them, just through perseverance, hard work, and a little help here and there, are suddenly correspondents in Washington and reporters in Milwaukee and doing all kinds of great stuff, Detroit, whatever.
So your hypothetical 17-year-old son says, Dad, I want to be the next Tom Cruise. You say, I go for it, I believe in you, or nursing degrees are good?
Look, my guys are 23 and 21. I've got one who's, working, behind the scenes for my Discovery ID program, and I've got one who's going to be at CBS News this summer, the younger one, and one wants to be behind the scenes, one wants to be on camera, and I didn't push them towards it. I mean, obviously, they grew up in the business. In fact, they were so immersed in it growing up that they didn't give a rat's ass that father was on TV. I mean, the only time it became cool was when South Park did a parody of me, and all of a sudden, had credibility.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's another nice little feather in your cap.
Wasn't that a real thing, though? Like, when you saw South Park parodying you, wasn't that kind of like a little bit of pride?
Forget all
like,
those Emmys. Like, when South...
It's funny because I was working on a story on the West Coast. I was in San Francisco, and one of my agents had texted me and said, you're on South Park right now. It's pretty funny. And about 24 minutes later, I get another text, and it says, it's taken a dark turn.
That's great.
How did that episode go? I don't know it.
It was Cartman pretended he saw a kid in a store who had Tourette syndrome. Mm-hmm. And in order to calm him down, his mother bought him like the coolest toy in the whole toy store. So he had this idea, and he was going to fake that he had Tourette's. And his friends, the other kids in South Park, were calling him out on it, and he he then calls Chris Hansen from Dateline to come to South Park to do a story on Tourette syndrome. And so we're getting ready to do it, and he's about ready to be exposed as being a liar, and he doesn't want to do the interview. And I kept saying, have a seat right over there. I'm Chris Hansen. They drag it out. There you go. And, it played on from there, and then took a dark turn at the end.
That was a good episode.
It was.
Well, how do the people find the Kickstarter program? How do they donate? How do they make that happen?
So you can go to Kickstarter.com and look under staff picks, and it'll say Hansen versus Predator. You can also go to HansenVersusPredator.com, and it'll take you right through it. And they can get involved. We've got another week to go, and we're, right on track, ahead of schedule, and I'm excited to get through it and get out there in the field and start doing investigations.
I'm really excited to see the new show.
We have a goofy question we ask a lot of our guests. Are you ready for this? All right, Chris, you're on a stranded island, right? Boat sinks, you're stuck there. You're going to be there for a couple of years. And your only companion
Wilson
is a mermaid. All right? Are you going to make your mermaid top half or bottom half fish?
You guys are terrible.
Think it through.
I don't know. I guess bottom half fish, right? At least you have a human face to it.
What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to dig that deep into my psyche to find out.
We do. Yeah.
I think Chris Hansen is an oral guy. You're gonna want if that's his answer.
Go easy, guys. Go easy.
Maybe he just wants someone to talk to.
I chose top half fish. You know why? Because I wanted her to have a human brain, and I thought I'm top half human. I said that.
No,
wrong.
it's because you were incorrect. That's the reason that you picked that option. See, you want the top half to be fish. Bottom half to be human.
If the top half is human, she has a human brain. And then I feel like we can be companions. And by the way, she's a mermaid. This is her element. I think she can find us food. That's a big deal. She can come back and bring fish. No?
Well, thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. And
I wish you the best of luck with your pedophile hunting. It's my favorite thing on TV, and I can't wait for it to come back on again.
Great. It'll be on soon.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, guys. Thank you.